Hey everybody, how's it going? Well, welcome back to Ready for Media. Here we are, next lecture session. I hope everybody's on board with everything that's been done. I appreciate people getting in there. The very first assignment. Now we have the next assignment, which is going to be due on Monday. I'm taping this over the weekend, so so basically, there's going to be, obviously time to actually still do this assignment. This will be posted on Monday morning, so you'll see it. And then, of course, I have another assignment that's going to be coming in. Actually, I'll be doing a week. And also, you'll have your rewrite opportunity for this profile assignment that you're doing, writing on somebody you know. Okay. Let's share the screen here. Okay. Which actually don't have what I should have actually propped up here yet. Actually, I'm moving. I was watching. I apologize for that. Things are moving a little slowly. Sorry about that. Okay, come on now. Okay. All right. So, just a few things you should know. I'm actually not done writing this lecture post, but I have a new assignment. Everybody can rewrite it. It's not just people who get R's, but anybody can. If you actually write from, if you have a B plus, especially, you should rewrite it to an A. I mean, I have seen people rewrite R's into A's. I mean, so believe me, that's what journalism's all about. It's actually really a lot about the rewriting more than the actual writing. So I really believe that you should always shoot for a higher grade. If you've got a C or a C plus. And actually, I've graded a couple already, and actually, I'm really actually quite pleased what I've seen so far. And I mean, I know it's a little bit early. Just actually, like, I meant to actually call up one of them. This is actually something to do with our next assignment. Okay, so let's actually call up this one. But anyway, remember also, like I said, please send in a Word document, not a PDF, because I can actually grade on the Word document. By the time you see this video, many of you probably have already seen this, because I actually like to grade ahead. I don't actually like to. I try to move things a lot faster than I used to. When I'm on my last job, I really didn't have a lot of time to do anything. But I basically, have now on my new job, I've actually been able to find more time to do things, especially things like this. So like creating and tending to your work. Okay. Um, so anyway, let me just talk a little bit I mean, we also have chapters to go over. I want to get more specific about what you're expected to do when you actually write a news story. Get a little, because what I've talked to you about so far is kind of more general. I've talked to you a little bit about the inverted pyramid and how that works. I want to really talk about like what happens inside that inverted pyramid. I've talked to you a bit about the who, what, where, why, how, and when, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about how that essentially should be structured, and it should help you with your interviews too, um, for whatever assignment we're doing. Okay. First of all, I want to show you like the new assignment we're doing. Okay. And I'm actually right now I'm in teacher's view, so sorry about that. And again, this is over the weekend, so it's actually not posted yet. This is usually kind of like I give out this assignment because I actually believe in actually once we kind of reach out there and we actually do a story, like sometimes I think it's good to maybe kind of retreat a little bit, and not retreat, maybe it's a bad word, but like maybe really kind of look at the fundamentals of things. Um, you know, because I see things that like it's not just a matter of like structure, or it's not just a matter of like getting things right, because I've talked about the importance of accuracy, clarity, and focus, but also things like Associated Press style, how things should be worded. I've talked a little bit about that, but also like really trying to get acclimated to the actual way that news writing works and how it's written. Okay. I got my first taste and basically said we got to work on some fundamentals here. Okay. First of all, I need Microsoft Word doc. This is actually the next assignment, the second assignment, which will be due in a week, due on February 6th, the same day that the rewrite will be due for the profile assignment. Okay. this is not a creative writing class, so avoid glorious adjectives. I saw one story where somebody kept repeating the word, kept calling somebody the unique. And there's something that's actually called, and I actually have it down here, basically show, don't tell. If somebody is unique, you don't have to say they're unique in the story. That don't tell the reader how to think. Just show me how they're unique. Show me what they do. If it's a job that's unique, and show me what they do. I mean, if they're doing like the story I'm going to show you is actually somebody who became like a head barista. Okay, so maybe that's not becoming like president of the United States, but at their age, actually, that's actually kind of interesting, and they actually get to create their own drinks and set their own essentially agenda for what they do in their job, and that's a great thing for somebody who's like 26-year-old to get to. Okay, so you show me, you don't have to say that that person's unique. Just show me how they're unique. Show me what they do. Show me the drinks that they do. That sort of thing. Okay. Remember that paragraphs really need to be more than 2 or 3 sentences, really, but the lead really should be no more than 1 sentence. Okay. Um, I mean, sometimes it could go a little bit longer, but really creativity, it's not a matter of creativity. It's really just a matter of just trying to get the news to people, get the information. Again, news is the plural of new. Should remember that. So when I'm looking for a story, the focus of a story is what is the newest, biggest thing. Okay. It's full name on first reference and last name on second on future references. Okay. So please remember that. A few tips about actually like reading your stories. Try reading them out loud, because they should actually come across as um something that's, again, conversational, where you'd be able to take pauses, as I've showed you before. Basically you kind of, you don't run on, no run on sentences so the reader gets bored or gets lost. Direct quotes, really, I mean, I talked a bit about that, and I'll see that in my papers, but you really should like be a storyteller more than a stenographer. Don't feel like you got to put everything between 2 quotation marks. Okay. Basically, you want to have you want to paraphrase what people say. You want to be an interpreter. Okay, not a stenographer. Stenographer, if you don't know, is that somebody who basically takes all the information down during a court session. Okay, you don't want to just be somebody who just repeats what's being said. You want to basically interpret what they say and write it in a way that people can understand. You're the professional writer, so take what people say, and people are the primary source for reporters. Documents are also a source, but people are primarily, interviews, stuff like that. And write in a way people can understand. Take a sentence that maybe be running long, and like put a period in the middle of it. So there's 2 sentences, and then it's both sentences are easier to read. Okay. Like I said, if you find that unique piece of information, stick with it from the top of the story to the bottom. You probably saw me write that in the very first ungraded assignment. Basically, I would tell you, basically, this is a lead you probably should have followed with, I would have stuck with. Okay. You stick with it from top to bottom. Okay. I talked to you about show, don't tell. That's one of the big catchphrases in journalism, is to really just show. Just basically give people what they want on a plate, and don't feel like you need to kind of like tell them that they're unique or glorious or use adjectives, because that colors, that shades, that taints the facts. Okay. It's not your job to basically be analytical in a news story. It's your job to just basically be the fly on the wall and see things, as they say, from 10,000 feet up, and give you that as objective viewpoint as possible. Okay. Here's a big one you're going to want to know for this assignment. Okay. Is that what happens with this assignment? And I'll show you right here. That's not it. You're going to be writing leads. This is actually an exercise in writing leads. Okay. So you're going to basically take a Microsoft Word document, and you're going to basically take the stuff that's here, there's some information that's supplied. What I want you to do is to write a 1-sentence lead out of each of these pieces of information that's provided. Okay. This is going to be doing a week. It'll be due on January 3rd, or sorry, February 6th. And basically you try to find that one thing that you feel is like unique, it sticks out, and people want to know. A little bit of a hint, by the way, numbers matter. I see that a lot. People will skip that. If you see like a big increase in something, that matters. Okay. So, if you're moving to a neighborhood and you see like a big increase in crime, you might want to know that. Maybe you might have second thoughts moving to that neighborhood. So you want to like find like specific information and write a sentence on that. And that will basically give people, an idea what the story is about and why it's important. Okay. And I'd make a big deal about how, like, a lot of people do this. I've done this assignment before, obviously, you can tell. But they actually, what they'll do is they'll confuse what are leads with headlines. Headlines is something we don't do in this class. It's actually something I do in media ethics and in digital reporting because we learn more about being an editor, a producer, that sort of thing. But headline writing is actually something completely different. Okay, it's actually like a lot. It's a different tense. It's usually done by the editors themselves. It's, you see, man is shot on subway train in Lower Manhattan. So you can see right there, it's written in a present tense, and there's actually a lot fewer words. It's said in a way that's supposed to be catchy, supposed to be. I mean, it's unfortunate to say catchy because it's a tragic incident that happened here. But there's fewer words. There's like maybe verbs taken out. There's like, it's just basically something that basically almost like an advertising billboard kind of approach, trying to grab your attention. And it's written, like I said, typically present tense because it's supposed to show some sort of live action, give the reader like a sense of being there or something like that. But once you get into the story, then you're actually returning to normal. And then you're writing essentially in past tense. Okay. A 34-year-old man was shot early Saturday afternoon on a moving subway train. Okay. An attack that happened hours after the mayor touted a decline in crime. Okay. So there you can see right there it's written in past tense because something happened in the past. Okay. And what I do is I actually give you kind of a kind of basically something that actually like you read. It basically shows you the difference between what a headline and a lead is. Okay. It might take a little bit of time coming up and everything. Okay. But for this assignment, that's all you got to do. This is not, so this kind of veers away from like what we typically do in this class, and that is essentially write stories. Okay. Now you're just going to write a 1-paragraph lead for each of these pieces of information right here. Okay. Okay. There's a fire, Bureau of Investigation released a report. There was an attempted murder. Okay. Make that attempted murder as unique as possible because unfortunately there are a lot of attempted murders in the world. So make it as though it's like something that basically is something that, is different from every other one that's like that. And I hate to put it that way, but that's how it works. So yeah, so this is what I say here. I said, go to under sections 9.0 and 9.6. Okay, so what we have here, we have a lead is the first paragraph of the story after the headline. It is the most informative and impactful of the entire story. Its role is to lead the audience into the story's main body. The headline may have an element of surprise or awe aimed at generating the reader's interest, and the lead satiates that interest as well as enhances the level of satisfaction. It basically provides an extension of the headline, but in a normal conversation, in normal language, okay, not present tense. And like I said, then if you go down to 9.6, okay, it basically there's like a whole different thing. Obviously, it looks different. It's bigger, obviously, the headline. It's not an actual sentence, okay? All right, so just please know that because like I said, whenever I do this assignment, I get a few people, that's fine. I understand it's a little confusing sometimes, who write just basically headlines and that's it. I'm asking you to write a full sentence for each of those pieces of information, okay? Let's look at like basically what we have so far to show you an example, and this is actually from Anna. She did a good job on this. Now this is actually a good grade for the very first assignment, the first draft, as they call it. Okay. If a lot of people get R's on their very first draft, because like I said, I feel like, this is what happens. A lot of people will start from the beginning. They start from scratch, essentially, when they're doing news writing. I mean, it's something that you basically aren't used to doing. It's something that basically, you're used to doing the what I did on my summer vacation kind of story. Okay. First words I really should see in this kind of story are probably the person's name. Okay. Just be as straightforward as possible. Casey Ware was recently promoted to head barista at Cedar Beans Coffee joint Cedar Grove in New Jersey. Basically, this is AP style, so please make sure you know that. That's basically how New Jersey is abbreviated. And actually, that's how typically this is the AP style. When actually you put New Jersey after a town name, you actually abbreviate it. That's an example of how the Associated Press style book works in your favor because it basically tells you a certain universal language that's used for things like abbreviating things and stuff like that. And they usually go with what's most recognizable. And New Jersey is, there's a postal code that's just NJ, but when New Jersey's abbreviated, it's most recognizable as N period J period. Okay. Now, the reason why I give her C plus is because I felt like there was stuff down here, basically about the stuff that she did that was actually important. This is like, the position is highly coveted at Cedar Beans. Many coworkers began to vie for the title. You know, she fell in love. Basically, there's a quote right here. She loves the smell of the beans. Some of her responsibilities. I felt like some of that stuff should move up because that's one of the first things I want to know when I actually read this story is like, what does this job entail? What is it about? What does she do right now? Was she fired? I mean, that sort of thing. Is she advancing? Is she up for a promotion? That's why I said to her right here when she started to talk about like, when she started doing the job and stuff like that. Well, when this COVID pandemic started, that was 3 years ago now. So it's actually a long time ago. That's background. Background goes lower. Okay. What I want to know is like, what is the job? What does it entail? How does she balance it with everything else she does in her life? If it's actually this person is 26, she's not a student, but like, how does she balance? If she is a student, how does she balance it with like her student life, that sort of thing? That should be like coming right after the lead once we announce what this story is about. Okay, then we can get into the background, which is still important, but not as important. That's the inverted pyramid style. We bring the less important stuff down to the bottom because it's stuff that happened a long time ago. And it isn't interesting to know, but most people, again, don't read past the first couple of graphs. So you want to get them hooked into what this is about. If it's exciting enough to write about and focus on in the top of the story, then we should tell them why it's focused. We should show them why it's focused, I should say, on this, job promotion. Okay. So anyways, and you can tell, like, basically this is, if I can go back to that lead again, again, it's a sentence, was recently promoted to head barista. It's past tense. Okay. It's something that's happened already, but it's happened in the recent future, recent past. Okay. So, very straightforward sentence, very simple, that sort of thing. Okay. So that's another thing that's actually, I posted it over the weekend, under the assignments. Don't forget that you have the rewrite opportunity. Now, one thing you should know is that some people will confuse this too. There is an entry for the first assignment, the first draft. Now there's a new entry for the rewrite. So when you post your rewrites, make sure you put this under the first assignment, spring 2020 rewrite profile of somebody you know. Okay. Again, due February 6th at 11:59 p.m. Okay. So let's know that. Okay. All right. So that's basically like some of the housekeeping items we have, basically what we have. Again, like if you have any kind of questions of basically how the story should be rewritten, we don't have like an in-person class here, so feel free to ask me questions. Maybe if you want to like set up office hours, that's usually something. The most frequent time I have office hours typically is usually like the first week, because people get like really worried when they see like their grade. Oh my God, I got an R, that sort of thing. What can I do? What can I do? And when I show them, a lot of times how to get to basically an A or maybe even just a higher grade, whatever. Like there's like a sense of relief perhaps, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Okay. So feel free to do that. Okay. And don't forget, there's also reading assignments. So, the next chapters I asked you guys to read was chapters 7, 9, and 13. And this deals again with more of the basics of writing. Okay. So let's talk about that right now. This chapter 7 is about basic news leads, okay, which is pertinent because of your new assignment, which I call the worksheets assignment, okay? And basically what you want to do is you want to identify, it says here, with any kind of lead, you want to identify the central point. And the preparation begins before gathering information when the story is just an idea in the mind of the reporter. A lot of times you actually get an idea like what the story is about before you even like know, because maybe you have some idea what the person does. That's why you guys to actually interview your friends, because you can go past that hurdle of having, the cold call, like, who are you? I mean, it's a little bit different than like if I had you in person. What I do is the in-person class I have is actually I had people interview each other in the class. So they have that step. But because we're in the situation we're in, I don't have the opportunity to work that step. So basically, I try to like let you kind of overcome that hurdle of like getting to know people, like, or stopping random people on the street and just pick somebody you know. Okay. And maybe you'll have some idea, like I said, that like what that story is about already. It may not work out that way because you oops you may like think somebody, but then like once you start doing the interviewing process, you're like, what? I didn't know that. And again, like with the interviewing process, as I've said before, you should like think about this: who, sorry, it's going slow, what, where, why, when, and how. Okay. And like I said, you think of maybe like ahead of time, you think of maybe the list of questions you might want to ask. Maybe you're not sure exactly what it is. Maybe you have an idea what that person's about. So, but think about like questions you might want to ask, but just try to put these in front of them. And you may like ask multiple wheres or multiple whats. What and but I gotta tell you, the most important ones, of course, are going to be what. What is this story about? Why do I care? Okay, probably the two most important questions. What do they do? Okay, if you're writing a story about a person, that's actually usually like the first question you're going to ask. What do they do? Why are they here? Why do they feel the way they do? You might have stories about people who are like juggling all sorts of things in their lives. And, how do you, that's where maybe the word how comes in. Okay. Basically the book gives you an idea, basically how to follow. I mean, this chapter here, 7, actually gets into things like, basically like digitalization, things like that. You don't have to worry about that stuff right now. But yes, making an outline is actually like a good idea. And it doesn't have to be like the old fashioned Roman numeral outline, but basically like what I showed you right there, the who, what, where, why, when. Maybe you just kind of like, basically, if you don't know the person, maybe you just do like, who are you? What do you do? You basically do like the kind of list with those W's leading the questions. Okay. This just basically goes into like what essentially like goes into a story these days, but then it goes into basically what I want you to keep in mind when you read these chapters. And I'm basically, again, like people ask me like, why do we do these readings? Well, when I don't test you on it. Well, again, I'm required to do that, to be honest. But again, it's supposed to kind of supplement what I say, but it's not going to always like repeat what I do. Okay. So they go into things like summary lead, things like that. But basically these leads are basically all the same. And that is, they just basically try to like get you the news as fast and as quickly as possible. I actually like to say, I actually like to call the leads that we're doing right. There's gonna be other leads that we're going to talk about later, like when we do feature stories and stuff. But the actual leads that we're doing right now, essentially, I like to call essentially our hard news leads. Basically as straightforward as possible, like a Twitter tweet. Okay, something that basically gets you the news as quickly and as fast as possible. Okay, hard news. Oops, I didn't expect that to happen. Traditional news, and also this goes back to the days of like when everybody bought what they call the Dead Tree paper, the paper edition, and that was basically like the daily news lead, because back in the day they actually used to save the feature stories for what was the most widely read newspaper day of the week, which was Sunday. That's when they had this. I don't know if you guys remember that day, or they still have it, because that's when the paper was big and fat, and there's a lot of advertising that goes into it, and they would typically have stories that are longer and actually really are written to be read. And that's when you have more of your feature-oriented stories that don't necessarily have to have the hard, straight news lead. Maybe they have a more suspenseful lead that goes into it, which we'll get into later in the semester. Okay. So you have a hard news, your traditional news, daily news lead. Okay. And what they show you here is basically how do you get there. So basically you have what you have here is similar to what I showed you on that worksheet assignment. You have like a patch of information right here. And how do you like basically narrow it into something that's actually like a traditional straight daily news lead? Okay. You want to put all this stuff in here. All this stuff is not necessarily important. You have to think about, again, unique and importance. Like what's important to the reader? What should they take away from the story, especially if they're going to leave the story right away? Okay. You don't necessarily have to know the age. You don't necessarily have to know the name. Actually, a lot of times they leave the name out of the first paragraph because, to be honest with you, and I hate to say this, but the name isn't necessarily important if it's somebody who's getting in trouble or something like that. Unless it's like a celebrity or something like that. Remember last week when I talked about prominence? Well, that is an issue. That does matter. If President Joe Biden is arrested, then you want to know it's President Joe Biden. But if it's Joe Blow, it's not as important. Okay. So Charles E. Vicker, blah, 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 all this stuff, the address. It makes for a very slow reading. Was severely injured Sunday morning when bicycles were collided, blah, blah, blah. 20th, you had this blood alcohol count, all this stuff. You cut it down into something that's more readable and something again that you would say in a conversation, because you wouldn't babble like this in a conversation. You would say one Mechanicsburg man is dead and another severely injured after the bicycles they were riding were struck by a drunken driver Sunday afternoon near the nearest intersection. That's it. Much like you would say it as fast as possible, because you want the reader's attention and you want them to actually read the story, okay? And you want them to actually read the sentence, okay? They don't get lost, okay? Again, I was going to say they actually give a little bit of lesson here, the difference between a headline and a lead, okay? I know I spell lead L-E-D-E, basically, I've showed you that before, but basically, Microsoft begins latest, see it's written in present tense. They cut out words aren't necessary. They're just trying to really kind of grab your attention, okay? But actual lead would be an actual sentence that you would say in normal conversation, okay? This is something maybe you would, this is something maybe you would shout down the street to grab somebody's attention. This is something you would tell people basically to, once you get into that conversation. Microsoft has started cutting thousands of positions, mostly in its sales department, days after announcing it would shift sales strategies and focus more on cloud services, okay? The lead is still very economical, is a word that's actually used in journalism a lot. Okay, but it's not a headline either. It's not in the opposite direction of what I was saying before. It's not babble, but it's not too short either. Okay, it gives you some detail. Okay, tries to hook you into this story. This chapter talks about things like stressing the unusual. Obviously, we've talked about that, but obviously the magnitude, things like that, you want to get into, like maybe how it's important to people. Things like if it's happened nearby, you obviously want to like say that, because that's again proximity. Some of the stuff we went over last week, because you may know the person if it's like an accident or maybe an arrest or something like that, or maybe if it's something good that happened to people. Okay. Now this is big, and you're going to see this on your papers this week, the papers that you've been handing back. Be objective and attribute opinions. Attribution. Okay. So attribution is something that basically is the footnoting, the sourcing style that's used in journalism. You do not do the sourcing footnote with the thing on the bottom, okay? With a reference material and stuff. I've seen some of this already. You do he said, she said, they said. It doesn't have to be a plural noun, obviously, plural. It could be, I think what Cole said, okay? This is how you basically give people the idea that this story is not made up. Okay. This story is basically coming from somewhere. This story gives this attribution gives this idea of people this story is coming from somewhere. That basically they know that maybe, hopefully, I mean, people will make up things and still do things like this still, but basically gives people the idea that, like, yes, you put your name on it, you put it out there, and you know what, if somebody was going to dispute it, they would see their name on the internet, they would Google it or something like that, and they would come across it, and then they would be taken down. Okay, so you stuck your neck out enough to basically, that person stuck out their neck out enough, basically give their opinion or basically a little known fact, and that's basically when you do attribute information, is when it's an opinion in your story. You have to attribute to a source and not yourself. Okay, you have to attribute somebody, and then that happens all the times in stories. In that barista story, there was maybe some opinion that she liked the job and she was really enjoying it. That's an opinion. So you have to basically give it to the source. You can't basically give that opinion yourself. Okay. The other time you give an opinion is basically when it's a little known fact. Okay. And that's basically, again, like how many people knew that Cole was actually a barista. So they basically are letting people know something that's maybe a little known fact. Joe Biden is president. Everybody should know that. I know some people dispute that. That's crazy talk. But that's something everybody knows. That's not a little known fact. It doesn't need to have attribution. He said, she said, Biden said. Okay. But, Biden, documents were found in Biden's garage. You weren't there. You didn't see it. Okay. Classified documents, I should say. So basically it has to be attributed. So it came from somebody, some source. It has to be attributed to somewhere. Okay. So that's basically when you actually attribute something to a source. Okay. And it's very important. You're going to see that in your papers, especially when I really start showing you some of the nitty gritty stuff. In journalism, you're going to start seeing that. And I really like to see that in your rewrites, to see the attribution and the rewrites of your profiles. Okay. More of the chapter kind of goes into things like, obviously you don't want to insert opinion, you don't want to exaggerate, you don't want really your source to exaggerate either, but you want to make sure that whatever is being said, or if it's documented or something, that you let people know that came from somewhere. And your name is on the story as an author, and that's it. Your name is not on there as a source. Okay. And as I said, when we do these chapters, you avoid these, do not do these assignments at the end of the chapters. We're just reading these to basically supplement what I talk about in class. Okay. And I'm kind of just flipping through actually, what I should do is I should go to chapter 9. Okay. Which deals more of the basic stuff that I like to talk about here. And now we get into the stuff, the body of a news story. Okay. The inverted pyramid style. Okay. And let me show you what that is right here. And there it is, people, the inverted pyramid style. Okay. All right. And just give me 1 second right here. Okay, stop and share. It's going really slow. Just give me 1 little second right here. It's going really slow. Nice. So let's go back to that inverted pyramid. Okay. Okay, so basically what you have here, this is what it looks like. It's basically a story is an upside down story. Okay. I'm sorry, a news story is basically like what would be a typically upside down from what you're used to seeing in a story. There are no conclusions in a news story. Again, your conclusion is your lead. That's basically where you make the concluding. Okay. But you do it in an objective way. Okay. It summarizes the story. Okay. It tells you basically what the main point of the story is. Okay. The central point. Okay. And then what it does is it breaks it down into smaller details. And it's not always like a complete perfect triangle, because a lot of times the details go from top to bottom, almost like it's equally important. But the lead is always the most important thing, because it basically gives you the main idea of the story, and that is the most important thing about a story. These profile stories you're going to find yourself doing like a lot of like important points about that person. Okay, and they're going to feel like they're equal, not necessarily declining, but you just have to basically figure out like how the reader will want to see it. What do they want to know first? What do they want to know second? What do they want to know third? And background is one of the last things they want to know, because something happened in the past. So basically, this is kind of like basically what designed after maybe after a crash story or something like that, where basically it summarizes what happened, identifies the injured, people who are hurt in the accident, or even unfortunately maybe even killed. I hate to say that. And then that's one of the first things people always want to know. Okay. When there's like a storm that happens and people are hurt or something like that, like some big catastrophe, that's one of the things. Do you know the person? Do you want to like is that something that do you feel like it's something you want to know about? You want to know like who was the person, how old the person was, that sort of thing. It's one of the first things people want to know. The people have compassion, they want to know. Okay. But they also want to know things like obviously like how it happened. They'll want to know like who was responsible, perhaps. That's one of the things. I think it's awful, and maybe it's a little vulturistic, but that's what people want to know. Is they sometimes, unfortunately, they want somebody to blame, but they also want to know things like damage the cars, but that's a little bit less important. I would say something that should be in here should be like, does it cause like traffic problems? I'd say that actually should be a little bit higher, because actually I hate to say it, despite the tragedy of the accident or something like that, people want to know maybe if it's actually like something that's actually changed the road schedule and close the road or something like that. Okay. So that's basically like how the inverted pyramid works. And it gets down to the minor details, maybe even some background, maybe it's some like stuff about that intersection and what's happened there. Maybe it's an intersection has a reputation for having accidents. We have an intersection in my hometown of Metuchen where like the truck always seems to crash into the traffic light pole, which is just crazy, right? So if something were to happen down there, that would probably like maybe some good background. It's something that happened maybe a while ago, but you'd want to know that, and it's important for people to know because they might want to avoid that intersection. We also have a trestle, a train trestle, where it seems like trucks always get stuck. So that's always a thing too. So that's your inverted pyramid style, is to basically like pick that most important central point and then basically break down the story into like smaller points that are maybe not as important as the overall. Okay. Gives you some tips on basically like how to proceed with the news. But again, a lot of that should come through your interviewing. Okay. You should almost be prepared to like, sometimes it's like, especially if you know the person ahead of time, you should have some almost like general idea, I think, like what the story, you don't want to put words into people's mouths. There's maybe some general idea, like what you're probably going to ask about that person, especially if you know what they do. And a lot of times you're going to find, like, when you're actually interviewing that person, you might actually like, you're almost like writing the story in your head as you're interviewing the person, because you're going to be going from like paragraph to paragraph. And I like to think that an interview basically is typically like a almost like a job interview. It's not like a typical conversation. The story is like a typical conversation, but it also it's especially when you're dealing with somebody you don't never heard of or talked to before. It's actually something that basically is going to be very kind of awkward at times or something like that. But I like to say, and I might have mentioned this already, but again, like your reporter radar should go off somewhere during the interview when you find like that one interesting thing about that person that may stick out. And then that's when your interview should shift and go in that direction. Then the who, what, why, where, when should go in that direction. Just recently named head of barista or something like that. Now I'm gonna go from the general, the macro, as I like to call it, to the micro. Okay. Let's focus on this one specific central point. Okay. They talk a little bit in here about like how to end a story. They call it a kicker. I like to think that like a really story should just end. Okay. A lot of times it's actually good. It says here maybe a good end with a good anecdote. Well, that's true. Maybe I like to say like it's actually good to end with a quote. Quotes are actually typically like the least important part of a story, because it's not necessarily providing you information. It's just providing you color and humanization. So you want to, um, you know, basically like maybe just end what I call like a walk-off quote. Not a conclusion, but just basically just a quote that just sends people away or something. Because again, most people aren't going to get down to that part. Okay. They're just going to read it like a Twitter tweet. Here's my Twitter feed right here. It'll get there someday. Boy, again, I got a 10-year-old Dunder Mifflin, excuse me, offense reference here thing here, where basically like you see like the tweets, from people. I'll see them from myself. There's your Elon. I don't mean to advertise for Elon Musk here. Yeah, this is me right here. But anyway, no, I did not pay for that blue check, by the way. I guess Elon's going to get rid of what they call the legacy blue checks. I got 15,000 followers, not to brag, okay? But yeah, it's a lost art and needed more. This is from a Hall of Fame baseball player. Basically, that's like almost like a lead, basically saying it's a lost art. Basically, this famous person is giving you news. Rod Carew says it's a lost art. I need more. I'm more than ever. And he's talking about bunting, which is something you do in baseball. Okay. So that's like a lead. You're basically giving people a little bit of a seat. You want to know more. So maybe you want to read Rod Carew's Twitter account and want to know more. Okay. This lead right here was a lot like that. I mean, it's a New York Times lead, so they're going to be a little stuffier, a little bit longer about their leads and stuff like that. But basically, you have a lead where basically a 34-year-old man was shot. They give you a little bit of, they don't give you right away, I don't think, the identification of the person. So that is not as important. So you're going to basically maybe talk about how it happened or when it happened. 1 a.m. there's been a lot of crime on the subways and stuff like that. So people want to know, again, proximity, localization, like, was this happening again at the subway? Again, familiarization, things like, oh, here's happened again. Maybe you want to stay away from there. People are still looking for the suspect. That's important. There's somebody who's dangerous who's out there. Notice that there's pauses in between the paragraphs. Okay. Paragraphs are short, usually no more than 2 sentences at a time. Okay. Okay. This chapter again talks about the focus style. Okay, well, again, that's really kind of repetitive of what I talk about. Don't get so much into the narrative style at this point. That's more for like feature writing, but we just try to stay focused on one main idea at a time and basically stay focused from top to bottom in the story. Okay. And then they kind of provide you some examples here. All right, now here's something else I like to talk to you about is transitions. Now, I'm not going to be a big pain in the butt about this right now, but this is where I'm going to tell you how, like, basically how a story is structured. And again, I talk a little bit about this on my when in my modules. I show you basically like my own when you can follow along basically on like this, AP style writing more writing basics. Basically this is when I give you the assignment about the paragraphs and the stuff like that. And I want to basically check for things like AP style and stuff like that and show the importance of that. More writing basics. So basically, again, this is supposed to provide kind of a guide as you go along. But well, one of the things we're going to talk a little bit more is about we've talked a little bit about more about the exoskeleton of a news story, but now I want to talk about more about the actual skeleton, the inner skeleton of a person. I'm sorry, of a story of what's inside that Everett Pyramid, and the kind of things that I follow in terms of like, again, like an outline, perhaps. So maybe like you want to do a general outline for your news story ahead of time, so you do who, what, where, how, why, when. Okay, but maybe you also want to do something a little bit more specific. Okay, so this is where transitions come into play. Transitions basically help move one fact to the next. They help guide the reader along from one step to the next as you move from point to point. Okay, and you actually this is more explicit, I would say, in TV journalism, because that's what TV reporter does, is they actually kind of act as the guide and move you from person to person they're interviewing in a story, major story, whatever. Maybe it's like a reaction story, and they provide the kind of transitioning that you do in a story, and again, to kind of help guide the reader along. But it's actually done in main stories too. It's not as clear as an apparent in a story like this, because almost like every story is like a transition. It's moving you from point to point. The victim was shot this way. Police are still looking for a suspect. It's kind of, these are basically all transitions. They're moving you from point to point. Okay. It's just basically like another fact is what a transition is, another point to make, and moving from point to point. But when you get into like a more in-depth story, like the example I showed you here, actually when we get back to the assignments here, and actually I probably should have called this up before, but basically like when you have a story that basically writing about a person, or about a subject or something like that, you want to, like, actually maybe I'll just show you this one right here. You want to like basically like also show what they call anecdotes, maybe like little pieces of life that are smaller piece of life within the larger story. Maybe like you want to feel like you're right there with it. I said Cole before. I'm sorry. Her name is Casey Ware. Think of the other story I was reading. Position of head barista is highly coveted. Blah blah blah. Many of her coworkers begin to vie for the title. That's actually more of a kind of a transition. I'm sorry, more of an anecdote. Basically, what she has here is she has like sentence to kind of guide readers along. She's made an loyal employee for 3 years. The customers know her by name. That's like a transition to kind of moving from point to point. And maybe you want to go a little bit more into depth into that transition. So then you show them what's called an anecdote. Okay. Right here. So this is like a transition to help guide you from point to point. And then basically it breaks down the lead into a smaller point. So she's head barista. What does that entail? Well, it entails basically learning the customers from name, their name, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then basically it's highly coveted. That's actually a transition too, I should say. Actually, let me retract what I said. So that's another point that's being made. Okay. Transition. The position is highly coveted. And well, here's basically an anecdote. What happens there in the a little slice of life, a smaller example of what happening in a story within a story. And you almost like almost the anecdote almost gives you a feeling of being there. Okay. And so why is it like something that's highly coveted? Well, many of our coworkers are vie for the title, but there's fierce competition. After the last head barista relocated to New York Christmas, just before Christmas. And also, this is maybe an anecdote also too. She shows extreme passion. She fell in love with the crafters. And then there's a quote, and quotes are like kind of de-emphasized. So basically it's, basically you have something that kind of shows why it's something that's highly coveted. People vie for it and people fall in love with it. That's more anecdotal information. Gives you, again, a slice of life, feeling of being there, a little story within a story. Okay. And that's kind of typically how a story pattern will follow. Okay. Is you basically start with your lead, Okay. And then you come with a transition. It's more easy to describe with like not necessarily a profile story, but like maybe an overall story. I've had people do stories, and we'll be doing stories like this. But like the past, we've done stories like when they lifted the mask mandate. I'd had people go out and do reaction to that. So basically, it was actually people were happy. Oops, people were happy was the overall day. People were happy about the mask mandate being removed. Okay, or lifted, I should say. Okay. And then what you want to do is you want to get into like a pattern where you go transition. Doesn't have to be exactly this pattern, but it's pretty close to it. And an anecdote, and then a quote. Okay, you typically this is this is a way of relying less on quotes and basically being the storyteller I've talked about. Okay, so people were happy the mask mandate were lifted. So then you show one example of why they were. So you break it down to smaller details. Some were happy because they can see the teachers' mouths, and learn more. So that's how you break things into smaller details. You break things down into an anecdote. So maybe you do something like Tom Davis, a student, was failing until the mask was removed. That's a basically kind of on the scene story within a story, more finer point detail of the larger points that are being made in the story. And and then maybe you can break it down even further. It's great now, a short, quippy quote, you know. So the transitions. Then you move on to another transition, another reason why people like the mask mandate being removed. Others say they like it because they couldn't breathe or something. Okay. All right. Brings you from point to point in the story. There's probably like like I said, probably no better example to see like how transitions are effectively used in an actual TV report. I'm gonna actually show you something here that happened at Rutgers a long time ago, and maybe it's gonna surprise you a little bit. But this is actually like essentially like two stories in one right here. There was a terrible story that happened in 1988, 35 years ago, where there was a pledge. It was pledging fraternity. Obviously, he drank 33 kamikazes and died. It's very horrible. It was a huge story here, and it really kind of like gave Rutgers like a kind of really, uh, it was really bad. It was really and Rutgers, but one of the things that also came out of it is that Rutgers had to start to develop this reputation for being a party school for whatever reason. I mean, we were actually, I mean, it was a horrible tragedy, and obviously you want to report about that. We had vigils, the whole thing. And you feel sorry for what happened, and you want to know details about the tragedy, but we felt like the media was actually kind of taking it a little bit too far and basically making us out to be like this place where crazy things were happening all the time. And there was even a cover of Newsweek that showed that they say in reporting that one's an isolated occurrence, two's a trend. Well, they found like another place where something similar happened, and they showed a picture of Newsweek where they showed, I think it was the University of Colorado, where people were sad and mourning over what a tragedy had happened. Then they showed Rutgers where people were getting wild and drunk at a football game. So, and I remember my mother-in-law, I first met her like 7 years after this happened. That was one of the first things she said to me was like, "Is there Rutgers a party school?" So anyway, as horrible tragedy is, and I don't want to cry crocodile tears because Rutgers' reputation was damaged because of it, but because there are bad things that happen here, it should be brought to attention. But that's what Porter was trying to do here was essentially like first what they did was they come out with essentially is like the main news story, which is very short. It's basically just an update. It's very short. It's like a lead. Comes from this reporter, this anchor person who's first speaks, but then they shift to essentially what is the news story, and then the reporter, Perry Peltz, essentially like gives you a little bit of background. It's kind of a disorganized story. It's not one that I would have written this way. What she does, she provides essentially a story about um, the reaction on campus and how people are reacting to the tragedy that happened. First, there's the news story from, I think her name is Pat. I forgot her last name already. And then Perry Peltz kind of continues the story about like what had happened, the tragedy. But then like I said, then she kind of goes into transitions into this story about the reaction on campus and how people are dealing with it. So let's look at how this is done.
Medical tests are still being conducted on the body of a Rutgers University freshman to find out if he drank himself to death at a fraternity pledge party. News 4's Perry Pelton.
So that's essentially the lead. Now it transitions into more of the depth of the story.
Visitors to campus today. At first glance, this fraternity looks like any other on the Rutgers University campus. But a closer examination reveals the remnants of an all-night pledge party that has closed the Greek house of Lambda Chi Alpha, a pledge party that has left freshman James Callahan dead, apparently from drinking too much, and another student treated at a nearby hospital for alcohol-related illness.
The university is in mourning because of it. It's a terrible situation, terrible incident, and it's one that I think we processed and think carefully about a number of issues.
Callahan was one of 13 students who had been.
This is where it actually starts to turn into another story now, when she actually starts to talk about what happens on Rutgers campus and people's reactions to it.
Invited to join the all-male fraternity. According to one student, pledges were told to drink until they got sick, and evidently that's not an uncommon sight around the university.
I think a lot of people get very drunk. I think if you ride a campus bus on a Friday or Saturday night, you see people getting sick on themselves. You see people passing out. I think it's a big problem.
It's widespread throughout the campus, whether in fraternity, in the dorms.
Yes, that's me. My kids made fun of me for years for that.
Wherever. And I don't know how they're going to stop it.
Callahan and the rest of the students pledging the fraternity were all under the legal drinking age of 21, a legal limit that students admit is easy to get around.
All right, so this is actually where there's a transition that happens. She's actually like, so she goes from like me and somebody else basically like showing the anecdote, essentially, what goes on here. They kind of misquoted me a little bit, but whatever. I had a context quote there. I said a lot more than that. But now she's going to transition into basically like how readily available this stuff is here. So this is her, she's transitioning. She's doing that sentence I was showing you before, where she's saying like other students say this, you know, transitioning from point to point. She's being the guide through the news story, okay?
And a problem school administrators acknowledge.
We try and encourage students to run non-alcoholic regulations and policies.
Fraternities will almost become like drinking clubs now. So that I think it was not about time something like this happened. I wish it had been something where it was just a shock, but maybe this will just change sort of the atmosphere of fraternities here to clean up their act.
Do you think it's going to change partying habits here at the school?
I don't think so. Not on a long-term basis anyway. I think that for a while things will slow down and then they'll get back to the regular behavior, basically.
And after the fact at Lambda Chi Alpha, all fraternity and sorority parties have been temporarily banned. Perry Peltz, News 4.
It's actually banned for a year, I think it was. So it's, but that was actually my junior to senior year. It was very interesting. All right, so basically that is now they basically do that, and so that's where we're basically like, you know, TV reporting, I feel like is useful in a lot of ways because it actually is better at guiding the reader through, you know, taking it from place to place, being that tour guide, which is what every writer should do. Is basically, it would matter whether you're a book author or a textbook writer or whatever. You should be like some sort of like transitioning through the basically kind of introducing essentially a new topic, introducing a new point that complements or supplements or beefs up the largest points in the story. Okay. All right, let's go back to, yes, I'm finally watching Mad Men, by the way. 10 years after the point. I'm actually like, actually almost on the last episode. And that's one of the things I did to prepare today, was just to kind of relax a little bit. You know, importance of examples. I mean, some of the examples we've talked about already. You know, you want to back up things with facts, okay? Need to be fair. We'll be getting to more of that. But you want to be as objective as possible, as I say. You don't want to put yourself into the story, okay? And there's like some of the chapters and some of the assignments that I asked you not to do, that sort of thing. Let's just go to chapter 13 pretty quickly here. So writing for broadcast news, why do I have you read this chapter? Because we write for every platform, right? But I think it's important to know this because this is where maybe you're going to finally learn, basically, maybe like fall in love with your writing a little bit too much. I haven't really seen the opportunity to do that. Actually, with some of the, I would say some of your very first stories you did on yourselves were very good, actually. But we'll have people who will swallow thesauruses and stuff like that. But this is maybe like take ego down a notch a few. I'm just but basically broadcast journalism is pretty much forces you to be as succinct as possible. Okay. The leads are even more, they're not quite headlines, but they're basically as straightforward as possible. And you'll see that actually like in a script. Okay. You'll see like actually let me see, like in a news writing script, which they actually have as an example, some of the stuff where they go into like different versions of the pyramid. I don't know why they do that, but I really want you to just kind of pay attention to what I point to. They have the copy. I'm actually trying to find the script. Actually, like, they'll show it like right here. It's actually kind of written in very succinct matters. Like sometimes you'll see like the jargon that's in here. Lansing Bear, blah blah blah, will deliver the state address tonight. Okay, it's delivered very directly. Okay, and there's fewer words, fewer adjectives, that whole thing. Unless it's like a feature story, then they'll maybe even closer to like what you'll see like in a feature story in a newspaper or something. But I like to think that like it kind of resembles like a movie script. What was it? Oh, yeah. I asked the other people the other day like to actually point out a movie they like, and I asked them. I said like, hey, you want to see like a real example of basically like the style of newspaper or broadcast news follows. It's actually like kind of like a screenplay or a script. But basically when you see that, those of you who've done like acting before, you'll see it actually written. Oops. Sorry, you'll actually see it written in a way where there's actually spacing. Okay. You actually see like actual description, almost like an anecdote, where they set up scenes and things like that. And this is of course taking a very long time to come up, but that's basically like almost like how a newspaper or a broadcast news script will follow, is basically something along those lines, where they kind of bring you from quote to quote, people to people, place to place, point to point. Okay. Anyway, it's just taking a really long time to come up. And again, it follows that kind of like style that people are looking for, like in a news story where you can take a breather, it's very conversational in style. Okay. Again, the broadcast news, it's just something I kind of provide to supplement the work that I provide here in my lecture. And again, to kind of show you the certain styles here. So, okay, Get Out written by Jordan Peele. So you can see a perfect suburban house with bay windows and a front lawn. The Shaw family, Caucasian and warm. Richard, Nancy, eat dinner at the table. So basically, this is almost like your anecdote that sets you up. And then your quotes are like, see, it's not like, I want you to avoid the long-winded quotes. See these quotes right here? Very succinct and to the point. The one in Orlando. Which one are you going to? The one in Orlando, Disney World. Troy said that Mickey is not going to see. This is how people talk. They don't talk long-winded. Okay. And Jordan Peele didn't write that way. Okay. All right. So you see everything is kind of spaced apart. So it gives the person actually like reading off the script an opportunity to breathe, take a breath. Okay. Much like you would when you're actually having a conversation with people. Okay. So yeah. All right, so that's it for in terms of like the reading chapters. Let's see the next one we're going to read. It's down here. Okay, is going to be chapters 10 and 11. We'll probably deal more with actually like the specifics of making a news story and stuff like that. Again, don't pay attention to like stuff I'm going to have planned ahead for you. Again, this is not the actual student view. We've had the profile assignment done that already. The first assignment is due Monday, the end of day. So hopefully like you'll have watched maybe some of this videotape, even though I talked about it last week, but I provide you some more information today. And then the rewrite is due a week from today, meaning Monday, on January 30th. Okay, so you put that right in here. And then this next assignment, our second assignment, okay, writing leads worksheets, please do a Microsoft Word doc for that and put your leads into there. There's 7 leads in the first section. Make sure you do both sections. There's 2 sections. And then there's a second section with 5. They call them impact leads. They're the same thing. Basically, like you're just going to do the same thing. You're just going to basically write leads out of the collection of information that's provided in each point. Okay. All right, guys, so thanks very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking time out to watch this. Please, I hope you watch this right away. And that's it. Please let me know if you have any questions, especially like now you're gonna get your assignments back right away. Thanks very much.